Okay, I'm ready to paint some ornaments. You can see I've got these small ornaments that are wood, and they have a hanger at the top, which I'm going to paint metallic gold. But everything that's metallic gold needs to have a base coat under it, because if it doesn't show up very well. Now I am painting in just this little head, and if it's too dark I can dip it in the white. This is a color I mixed up with yellow, red, and the tiniest touch of blue, and I think that'll do it. Now the rest of this I just kind of have to make up. I'm going to make the crown metallic gold, so I am painting it under with a gold, and I'm going to go ahead and paint this. This paint, when I squeezed it out, it had separated a lot, and when that happens you shake it up, but I went ahead and put it out. I'll do a couple of coats on it, but I am going to go over this again with the metallic gold. And since I have my brush already wet, I'm going to go ahead and paint this hay in gold. Now that is a little bit bright. I may just put a little bit of white in there to lighten up the hay. And I can come back in here with that deeper gold and put some other lines in it. Usually I paint the background or the largest things first. I'm just going ahead to getting the things that I want in here right now. So I think I have put these little pieces of tape so that when I paint, I will have the viewfinder on the ornament, and I've enlarged it just a little bit so that it will show up well. Now these ornaments are almost the same on the other side. You can see that they're wood with a little bit of grain. I will probably go ahead and base coat that white also. Now I want this to be a light color, and I may just go ahead and get my yellow to make a little bit of green. Well, I can use this, and if I'm going to make a tiny bit of green, you start with the lightest color, which of course is the goldish yellow, and then add the tiniest bit of blue. Notice that this is a pretty small paintbrush, and I'm using that, and I don't particularly like this color. It's very olive green. So I'm going to go ahead and paint it, but I do have the option of always going back and painting back over it with a different color, because this is acrylic paint and they cover very well. I want this to be kind of a turquoisey color, and I have one out right over here. It's a very large bottle, so when I'm using a large bottle for a small spot, what I usually do is just unscrew the lid if it comes off. Now this is a little bit older bottle, and it's not wanting to come off at all, so I have to squeeze a little bit out. I'm just going to go ahead and put it on my mat over here. This is a Teflon craft mat, and I squeezed up just a tiny bit over here. Notice that because these are so small, that you only need the tiniest drops of paint. And actually, that's probably going to make a better green than using this blue. Let me try that. I'm going to do it right here where you can see it. Put a little bit of this turquoisey color and the tiniest bit of this yellow. I wiped my brush off on, oh, much better. I wiped my brush off on the paper towel. That is a much better color right in here. And it's still going to be darker because it had that olive green in between or underneath. Now I'm going to have this a burlap color. So let me take this and the tiniest bit of the brown. I don't know if you can see the brown over there, and mix in here because I want a darker color than what's down here at the darker than the straw, but not as dark as the manger is going to be. And I will probably come back later and put some texture in this so that it'll have kind of little lines looking. But this is so small, you're not going to get details. We just want this to look like the manger with the baby in swaddling clothes. Now, acrylics do dry darker than what they show. So this, I'm having to add a little bit of water to my brown because it was so thick. And that's awfully dark. Same thing. I can wipe off my brush, get some of this gold color, and come in here and make it a little bit lighter. Now, if you like these ornaments, I got these on Amazon. Ordered them in a package of 30, I believe. May have been 50. And they were very inexpensive. Can I quote you the price? Not right now, because I honestly don't remember. All I do remember is they were not expensive. Now this is giving us enough detail that we can tell that it's a wooden box. And the legs are also very, very simple. From this reference photo that I took, it was another lady that had painted this as an ornament, and I have permission to use her design. Most of my designs are my own, but I use others' designs at times, and I get permission to use them. And this was a lady that said she would be glad to share any of her designs, and I told her thank you. Now I can come back in and make little lines on that to give it more like boards, or I can just leave it and keep it simple. Now I'm going to go to a little bit larger brush, but I'm not going to get any larger than this because this is such a small ornament. I'm going to first try to see if I like this blue. It is awfully bright, but I think it might be a good one because I'm going to go back after it is all painted and put in some stars. And I don't know if you can see that the star that the Christmas star up there that's drawn in pencil. But I'm going to go ahead and paint over that because I'm going to put it back in with the metallic gold. I'll come in and paint it white and then put the metallic gold over it. Now when I'm doing this, I can sometimes just twist this to make it easy. I'm using the flat part of the brush to go in there where there's straight lines. And I don't like this to look uneven. So what I do is stroke it in one direction most of the time. And if it's too streaky looking, I either go back over it right when I'm doing it or wait for it to dry and put a second coat. This does not take long, but some of these spots get pretty small. And I have a selection of other brushes, and they go down very small. And if I feel like I need to paint it in smaller, I will grab one of those other brushes. Now, if I go over this brown lines as I'm painting this, it's absolutely not a tragedy because this is acrylic paint, and I can let it dry and go back and make a correction. So this does not take long, but what you need to do is just take your time to make it neat. Now I'm not going to take this big brush. I can't get in that spot at all. So I will change to a smaller brush and come in here and paint that. Now that, when I first started out, looked too bright. I'm actually liking this blue quite a bit. So I'm going to leave it that way. Now what, if you wanted to do one of these, and you didn't like the colors I chose, and you wanted to put red on the Christ child in the manger, well, that's perfectly acceptable. You can change it and make it any color you want. Now, I like the flat brushes on some of this, and I'm going to come in here and make that sharp because it's hay. This is a crown. I am going to have to get a smaller brush. This one is very small. So not a problem. And I just have to make the determination in a minute if I think it needs a second coat. I do think the little face needs a second coat because it looks streaky, and that's not a problem. Now, I either wash my brushes off immediately or I put them in a cup of water to let them sit until I can go wash them. That's the worst thing you can do, is let the paint dry in your brushes. You can get it out, but it's not totally guaranteed. Sometimes when it dries in there, you've ruined the brush. This was a set of brushes that I think these came from Walmart. Walmart does not have a whole lot of art supplies, but they've got some fairly decent brushes. You do not have to buy the expensive brushes to do things like crafts. Okay. While I've got this right here, I'm going to clean this brush out, and I'm going to go back in here and go back over this face a little bit. And maybe the tiniest bit of white to make it slightly lighter. Okay. Now I can come back in here if I want and outline it. So I'm gonna have to let it dry and then make that decision later. I'm gonna move this one off to the side and bring this Santa Claus. Now I did this lightly with pencil. I have some designs that I have printed off. I drew them off. First I just outlined the ornament, and then I went through and drew some designs in here for 6 different ornaments. And then I made a copy. So when you need multiple copies, you just put them all on the same paper, and you can transfer them with carbon paper, or what is even better is graphite paper. Now, I don't know if I really want, yes, I do want the bright red on this one. Or actually, this is Santa red, I guess. I like the darker red instead of the bright, bright, true red on my Santa hats. That's just a personal preference. And I like to have the lines in the hat because when you put a long hat, a stocking cap, they do tend to bunch up. Now there's 2 or 3 things you can do for the end of Santa's hat. You can put a star on it. You can put, I'm going to put a bell on this one, a jingle bell, or you can put the puff ball. So there's 3 different things the way you can treat that. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. It's just personal preference. And then I like spreading this out so that it doesn't look messy. Now Santa's got a little bitty face too, and I'm using the same color. Let me mix a little bit more, put some yellow in here. The tiniest bit of red. And maybe a tiny bit of white. And if you get too much of one color, you can always go back. You can put a tiny bit of blue in there, but if you put the blue in there, you got to be careful. Nope, a tiny bit more white because that's pretty dark. I don't want his skin really, really dark. I want it to be different from the white beard, but I don't want his face really, really dark, and that's very, very dark. So it doesn't look dark in here, but it is when I paint it on the wood. So I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to blot it. But if you're going to blot something, you go straight down and straight up. He looks like he has a hooked nose right now because I haven't finished painting it all in. When you're doing something tiny, you want a tiny brush. And I'm going to go ahead and go all the way up to the hat, and he's going to eyebrow in there. I will go back with the white paint and give him an eyebrow later. Now you notice that when you're putting out the paint, you only put the tiniest bit because these are tiny ornaments. And we do not want to waste all of our paint. Okay. And I am going to put a tiny bit of a little red lip underneath there. Now, because I base coat this in, I'm not going to go ahead and paint over the white on his beard right this moment. I'm going to paint the sky. And I can use a larger brush, but not much because I've got some details in there. Let me see here what I've got. I'm just going to go ahead and use this one. And I'm going to use the same color as I put this background in. It's a bright blue, but I'm going to go ahead and use that for this background. I will go ahead and put some stars in this background or some swirls in this background after I let it dry. And this is going to be a jingle bell. So I'm going to just try to keep this round and paint my background. The edge of these are brown because when they were cut out with the laser cutter or whatever they cut them out with, it darkened the edges, and I like that. So I'm trying not to get my paint over the edge. These are reversible, and I have some Christmas napkins. So I think I'm going to cut out the design on the Christmas napkin and use some Mod Podge and put them on the back. Actually, I said that wrong. Mod Podge is the true name of it. But it's a little bit easier to say Mod Podge, and several people do that incorrectly. Okay, let the brush do the work. When you lay it down, let the brush come around. Now this is just regular craft paint. This one is Deco Art Americana, but that's not all the brands. This one in the red was the Ceramicoat by Delta. So some paints paint better with one coat. Some of these craft paints take 2 coats. Just take your time. Remember, you can always turn it. And I've got a little spot right in here. I've got to get this brush into a point and get it in there. If you decide you want to do outlining, you don't have to be quite as precise with your painting, because you just take your brush or your Sharpie marker and you go over everything and get a black outline. But I don't think I want to do that on these. Okay. If I don't like the nose, I can let it dry and paint over the nose part. But that's not too bad. And it's hard to be sitting here alone in my art room talking to myself. Even though you may be watching this, I'm still talking to myself. Now I want to put okay, that's not smooth at all, so I'm just taking my time and smoothing over it. And let the brush do the work. When you go over wet paint, sometimes it lifts up some of it that's there. So just take your time. Now, I'm going to come over here and add a little bit of water to this. Not a whole lot. Wipe off my brush. I've got this paper towel in my hand. And I'm going to put some white here. And I want a very light blue. And I want to come in here. Let me get it back in my things and put some white and a tiny bit of water to make it flow. I want to put some white in here to show where these swirls are in the beard. And I don't like that line. I'm going to take my paper towel and just kind of wipe it off. So it's easy to do corrections on this. Just take your time, put in some little lines to make Santa have a interesting beard. Do a little bit. That's kind of big, but okay. I need the white to come in here and put an eyebrow right in there. And I'm going to take a little bit of this and come in here underneath the hat so you can show up the hat. Now, I still think that Santa's face is a little bit dark. That's a little better. Now I'm going to get my smallest brush, which is this one that's very tiny. And I'm going to come in here and just get a little bit of brown on the brush and come in and give Santa some shape to his nose and an eye. You don't need to do a lot of detail, just give him a little bit that looks like an eye, and Santa has an eye. Now I'm going to go in with the metallic gold again, but first, to put an undercoat, I'm going to just use this gold, and this is going to be the Jingle Bell. Okay. Now shape the brush to a point and do this lightly. And because this is so small, you've got to be careful to make this small here. Don't worry about getting too many details, but you're just coming in and making it more interesting. You can shape your brush here on the side of the palette too. That makes it interesting. These little highlights that you put in here are important only because they help give it a little definition. And if you didn't like it going as far as it did over there, you can bring in the white. Okay, I pretty well got all the base coats and stuff in here. I'm pretty sure that I am going to come in with the black. I don't know if you want to watch me do that, or I could come in with a paint pen later. Stopping for a drink of water. I get dry when I do this much talking. Now, let me see if I can get this lid off the black. Yeah, I can. A lot of times when I'm trying to do something, I will take the lid off the paint and just do that and use it instead of putting it out on the palette. But when you do that, you've got to be very careful that you put the whole bottle, and this is a very large bottle. It's the 8 ounces. Put it to the side, put it where you're not going to knock it and make a huge mess on the floor. How do I know that? Of course I've done it before. Okay, when I'm putting water on the brush, I'm just dipping it in the water very, very quickly. If I need to shape the brush, I can come to the side of the palette, or I can just come over here and do it. And guess what? My little details I put in over here, they spread out. Those little brown details spread out a whole lot. And I don't like what they did over there. So I'm going to have to come in with a dot of white. Now here's what I'm going to do to this Jingle Bell. And it's not quite dry, so I've got to be really careful. And then you just put little dots right there for the Jingle Bell. Should I be doing this right now? No, because it's not totally dry. But look what that does to it. It gives it more definition. And on the Jingle Bell, I'll probably just go around the side just like that. And not worry about all the details. Okay. So let me get this little bitty brush and come in here and get the tiniest dot of white. That's not... and put in that eye. That looks better. Okay. Maybe a little bit of shape right in there for the lip. And there I've got my little ornament, and it's going to get a little bit brighter once I put the spray. I usually use Krylon spray and come in and paint it. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit more detail in this. I'm going to come in here and show up the head. When you're doing little outlines, you get paint on the brush and shape it and barely come in. And paint it. Little bitty lines. And if you need to put some lines in here, you can. Notice I'm dragging the brush. That makes it much easier to do. Trying to give it some board looking things right in there. Okay. Now I've just got to find my metallic gold and put those in. You can put a couple of little dots in here like that's been nailed. They did use nails, but they didn't use nails like we did. I'm going to put a little bit of brown in here to kind of make the hay look better. Oh, I need to go over that crown. All right. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you get some ornaments and paint some for your family. Notice what I'm going to do now. I'm going to get just a little bit of paint on the end of this paintbrush and come in here and in a random pattern I am going to put some stars. Remember, random pattern. And if you want to come on the edges and do some white outlining along the edge, you can. It would look really nice, but that's a detail that you have to decide. I'm only going to come down about this far with my stars, and the rest of that is going to be ground or whatever down there. I'm not going to put stars there. I will come in here and mix some light things. Now, you may be concerned that I'm doing all of this over here on the mat, but I'll show you something in just a second. When you come in here, you can get this wet and it will wipe right up, and your mat will be clean again because it's silicone. Alrighty.